how do we harness hope? How do we grab, and I'm thinking about my grandkids right now that you and I talk about grandchildren all the time. And I've got the twin engines, they're 7 years old. And every moment I get to spend with them is just a joy for me because it reminds me of just that age, 7-year-old that just wake up asking questions, go to bed asking questions, and just see the world through this lens of absolute question, hope, opportunity. And I guess I wonder, in addition to the building of our capacity, is there an argument to be made that we're also finding ways to harness all of that energy in our pedagogy, in our classrooms, to take hope to the limitlessness of its possibilities, and that the feelings aren't really the ceilings, but endless in possibility. And how do we harness that? So I don't quite have it to the bumper sticker kind of jargon, but I just wonder if beyond building capacity, is there a way to just grab all of that energy that is there and harness it into the journey that awaits these young people and ourselves?
I met Paul McKenzie, I don't know, it's got to be 8, 10 years ago when I was with Discovery, and he was kind of part of the network, and I got to see him in action in where he was just had shifted to a superintendent level in Thames Valley, this school board in London, Ontario, but he had just recently come from being principal of that high school, and so we got to go to his high school just to observe, some of the interesting things, because he was just has always been involved in, like, how do we make schools better for kids? Like, what are the kind of transformative things? And one of the things and projects that he led and was part of was this idea of a school within a school. So really providing so much autonomy and agency to kids, and really progressive in many ways. But when we went to his high school, and again, he's about a year out from being principal at that school, we could hardly get around the school without having staff members and students constantly stopping him, telling how much they miss him and how much it was almost, he was almost getting embarrassed at the point, because we couldn't actually get through the tour because of all the people that wanted to connect with him. And that, I think, speaks as a testament to who Paul is as a leader. He is just, one of these people who I think people just gravitate to, and he's so caring and curious about others and wants to kind of get to know people, and just has such a heart for education. And I'm so grateful that he's been able to take that learning and support Saanich School Division on the island, and now as the brand new superintendent of Cathet School District on the Sunshine Coast in beautiful Powell River area, British Columbia. Just so pleased to have him lead there. And again, the underlying piece here in many ways is the fact that Paul and I are very much of the same vintage. We share a similar upbringing and a love for sports. And so anytime I can throw out an obscure 1970s or 80s hockey reference and he immediately knows what it is, that's kind of a bonus for me. But even if you don't care a whit about sports, you will love this conversation with Paul, as he just talks about his kind of perspectives and views on leadership, and how he's still working very, very tirelessly to make school the best possible place for those he serves. So enjoy my conversation today with Paul McKenzie. Mr. McKenzie, good to have you here. As you can see, I'm sporting the famed hat. And make sure I pronounce the school district.
I love it. Representing.
Cathet? Is it Cathet?
Cathet, yes.
Cathet. All right.
Yes.
Cathet School District in British Columbia, Powell River, SD47. What a wonderful place. Before we get too far down the road into some of the real education-related questions, you and I, of course, share such a love of sports. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how sports has played a role in your kind of leadership growing up. Because obviously as a kid, you weren't thinking, oh, one day I'm going to be superintendent, and that's really going to be helpful as I'm doing whatever I'm doing. But sports has been a pretty big part of your life, both as a participant, but also in coaching and other respects. So maybe just tell us a little journey about the role sports has played in your own leadership.
Sure. Thanks, Dean. And thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And we spent 15 minutes leading up to this and talked about a range of things. And including sports. I would say that one of the threads through my life has been sport. There are a number of threads, but I think to your question, the opportunity as a young person to participate in any kind of team endeavor, and I was involved in individual sports as well, taught me at a very early time about the power of team and the power of using your role, your skill set to support the work of a team in service to trying to win or be successful. I think individual sport taught me around about how to challenge myself and my limits, because in a lot of those kinds of cases, you're really the barometer is yourself and the limits that you set upon yourself. So I think both of those things were formative. And in my playing time, I really felt that I just loved the opportunity to be part of a team, to be a participant in something we're aspiring to do, to be in those moments of either triumph or defeat where we had to learn together and be shoulder to shoulder. And I think that my teaching career and certainly my coaching career, and I think more recently the leadership work I've been doing, probably has come back to those things, those root things quite a bit around the power of being part of something bigger than yourself, about the importance of being unselfish. Ken Dryden famously said that sport doesn't build character, but it reveals it. And I've often thought that it's a great place to find character and celebrate it and utilize it and harness it towards the better good. To me, I would say, to your question, it has had a massive impact on me and how I think about teams and about individuals within the team, and finding ways to maximize the people that are around you to a higher aspiration. And public education needs that more than ever.
And listen, I can attest to having spent time with you in 3 of your tenures that you apply those kind of things, and the whole notion of being unselfish and really wanting other people to join in with this effort is certainly something that you bring. The other thing that I want to ask you about is early in our getting to know you, when you were still in Ontario working in Thames Valley, you had just moved from a principal role into a superintendent role at the district office. And you and your partner, Rick Pardo, were part of something that was a school within a school concept.
Mhm.
And really was, as I talked to you and learned more about what your passion was from, it was this idea that school has to be different. So I wonder about, like, at what point in your career, maybe it was early on, maybe it was always, did you just look at the way things had been done and saying, this isn't right? So was there a moment when you just decided, or what was your journey to the point where it says we have to do things differently for kids?
Oh, great question. And Dean, that reminds me of some powerful memories from my time in Thames Valley. And certainly you mentioned Rick Pardo, certainly a person that I have deep regard for. We got to work closely together in our careers. I think probably even as a teacher, I was a high school English teacher and I'm a department head and loved teaching. But I was always curious about whether or not there were other possible ways that we could reimagine our use of time and delivery of curriculum and subject. And I had thought about the powerful possibility of, wouldn't it be great if we could collaborate on things as educators and reimagine the curriculum from not just a skills acquisition standpoint, but some of those applied opportunities. And where is the role of inquiry into that? So that was certainly further along in my evolution as a classroom teacher, areas of curiosity for me. And then as an administrator, I think that sort of curiosity continued to foster itself. And certainly my last principalship, and you had a chance to visit H.D. Beale Secondary School, we were starting a robotics program, and I had a number of teachers and students talking to me about the possibility of starting a club and a program. And I had the science teacher in the tech department and the communications teacher and all of these folks spending countless hours with students, integrating all of the things that they know from core subject areas into this project-based thing. And that's really where sort of school within a school became a question, is what if, hypothetically, we looked at the integration of subject matter and content with a collaborative teaching model that could provide an inquiry-based program for learners to achieve their credits from their subjects, but also do it in this integrated way. And so the school within the school journey that we took, Rick and I, was really around opening that possibility up. And we said, look, there are going to be bumper pads on this. We've got a collective agreement and we have got class size management things. But if we have a cohort that can generate the staffing for this, and we've got willing teachers that are prepared to take some risk and be vulnerable and lean all the way into this, what are the possibilities? So I don't know that I thought something was broken, but I certainly was curious from a very early age in my career, and it's followed me all the way through about, is there some other way that we can come at this? And when I saw the kind of efficacy and excitement from some of our educators in this, I said, I feel like we're on something here. Of course, the challenge is that with early adopters, it sometimes takes a little while for others to find the safe path to that. So I think part of our work was trying to figure out how we make it easier for people to track our results. But I really got excited about that. When I moved to Saanich, there's a program in Saanich at Claremont Secondary called Global Solutions. And I realized that there was a pocket of educators there that had been doing this for a number of years too, but completely independent of what we were doing. But it was the same kind of starting journey around what could it look like. And to date, it's a program that it made me realize that there's something else going on here. And in my early days here in this amazing district, I can see again that kind of curiosity, and it fosters itself. A really long-winded way to say it. I think it's been following me all the way along. And I think the key is to try to go and take some risks. And I credit to my director of education at the time, Laura Elliott, for giving us the permission and championing the work of that. And of course, Rick Pardo, as you well know, is just an absolute amazing educator and just an even better person.
And one of the things that also strikes me about all of that, and as much as the focal point of this is doing this for kids and making learning come alive and be relevant and all of those things, and you talked about some of the measures, I also, like, part of my brain goes to, because I remember you talking about bringing all these educators in and them not quite sure, is this for real? Are you guys really doing this? Are you going to pull the rug out from under us? What's the catch here? And so you were trying to be as transparent as you could, saying, first of all, you weren't giving them any more money. It's not, oh, here's a bunch of money that you'll get to do this. And then when the money runs out, then we'll have to figure it out. No, this is going to be done in the same way every other thing, and giving people the autonomy that they have to figure out some of this stuff on their own. We don't have all the answers. Again, we're creating the guardrails and providing the autonomy. But I wonder about, and if you could speak to the impact that you think it had on educators in terms of, just job satisfaction. Like, we're living in an age where there's a lot of teachers who aren't very happy. There's a lot of teachers who are struggling with their role for lots of reasons. So we're not going to get into all the reasons why that might be. But I do think about whether you're talking about your global solutions piece back in Saanich or your school within a school, could you tangibly or anyway look at those teachers who were involved in this kind of, I'm going to say it's groundbreaking work, but certainly different work? Is there a way to say that I think these people are generally more satisfied with their jobs than a random sampling of other teachers?
And at the risk of not speaking for them, I think I can confidently say for those individuals, and I know many of the programs back in Thames Valley that I've spoke of are still going with a lot of the same people. I know I spent a lot of time in Saanich with the team at Claremont as well. And I know that they would definitely attest to the fact that this, in some cases, really galvanized their career. I think when we started this, there were a lot of people, and you said, we were trying to be open about it. This is possible. We just said, want you to come out. We want you to come out and dream a little with us, and let's see what could be possible with this. And I remember teachers that I knew from my career in Thames Valley coming up to me going, are you serious? You really mean this? And we were clear about wanting to try this. And I would say that they have enjoyed the opportunity for the collaboration, that it pushed their teaching at a certain time in their career. I think a lot of the people that were coming to this had been teaching for a few years, and I think that was helpful for them. So they'd come to a certain point of, I loved in my classroom, but I'm yearning for something else. And I think that really hit a specific niche of teachers. And the people that I have in mind were all independently very gifted educators, still are. Sure. But this became something that manifested itself into something else. And I would say that it in the cases that I am thinking of, they would absolutely sing the praises of this from the standpoint of their own journey as educators. And it shows. You
Yeah.
meet in those classrooms, you see it immediately because it shows up in the engagement of the children themselves. So I would say, I hope I'm not misplacing this, that they are and continue to be significantly impacted by that and in a positive way. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come back to keep doing it.
Right. And again, to be fair, I guess to the whole experience is it was not only buy-in from teachers, but buy-in from students too. Not every student wanted to be part of this, right? And not every so the fact, and again, I don't want to say that to suggest that it was all now rainbows and unicorns, because I remember there were a lot of kids in there who the reason they were there is because regular school just wasn't working for them. This is not happening for me. And that didn't mean they were necessarily troubled kids. It's just like, we don't like school the way it's going. So you had a variety of students in there, but I also just think that there's something about creating a space where people are raising their hand saying, I want to go there and do that thing with those people, that puts you in a much better position than shoving someone in a room and saying, here's your kids, Mal, make it work, right? There's some of that
It's
as
that
well.
notion of putting your hand up, just that when you think of that student, that one of the first acts of vulnerability in the classroom is to put your hand up when no one else is in, and holding that space for that to be safe. But I guess similarly occupying that same possibility for educators in a system is, do we still hold those same beliefs about our educators as we do of our students, that they are learning and growing and want to take risks with the support of a district to do that? And I just can't help but think that is so important. I think it's always been important, but Dean, as you and I know, in the world that we're in right now, that those things that would maybe be argued as soft skills, I think are the hard things that we want to really lean into as much as possible in the spirit of human flourishing. And that's what keeps me excited, as you can see.
Here's a question that I don't know that I asked other people this one, but and I don't know why I thought of, I don't want to ask you this one, but if you could erase one kind of overused educational phrase forever, what would you get rid of, and what would you replace it with if you're going to replace it at all? Is there an overused sort of word or phrase?
Whoa, this is a good one. I don't think it depends. So you know what, Dean, I'm going to say, there's probably going to be someone that's going to probably write in, what? And it's not that I disagree with it. It's just that I sometimes wonder about the term building capacity, not from the standpoint of, do I believe in it? Yes. Do I understand it? Yes, in principle. But I sometimes feel like it gets dropped in as a thing that we say on it. And I think and I think I probably used it yesterday. I'm quite certain I did. But I do rethink every once in a while, is that exactly what I mean when I say that? Or is it something else? And I guess capacity to me implies that there's a ceiling. And I guess to some extent that's possibly true. But I think we're in the business, perhaps, doing something more than that. I think it's a yes. And it's about, how do we harness hope? How do we grab, and I'm thinking about my grandkids right now, that you and I talk about grandchildren all the time. And I've got the twin engines, they're 7 years old. And every moment I get to spend with them is just a joy for me, because it reminds me of just that age, 7-year-old, that just wake up asking questions, go to bed asking questions, and just see the world through this lens of absolute question, hope, opportunity. And I guess I wonder, in addition to the building of our capacity, is there an argument to be made that we're also finding ways to harness all of that energy in our pedagogy, in our classrooms, to take hope to the limitlessness of its possibilities, and that the ceilings aren't really the ceilings, but endless in possibility? And how do we harness that? So I don't quite have it to the bumper sticker kind of jargon, but I just wonder if, beyond building capacity, is there a way to just grab all of that energy that is there and harness it into the journey that awaits these young people and ourselves? That's a stab of it. And for any...
Yeah, but education is just full of jargon, full of phrases that people toss around. And in the back of my mind, I'm always like, and what do you mean by that? Tell me more what you mean
Yeah.
by those phrases,
Yeah.
because they can be a cover for, wait a minute, let's get down to actually what is it that we really mean here? And again, I'm probably like you, as I probably have things I say too that people say, what does he mean by that?
Just today, probably.
And I'm not clear with
Mhm.
my own kind of thinking. But again, I love when people do challenge me to say, tell me more what you think about that.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well,
Right.
wait a minute.
Anyway, that's my thought on it.
Yeah. If you were to make a highlight reel of your career right now, all right, so you've got to submit, the videographers are putting together the Paul
Ooh.
McKenzie education career, and you got to pick 3 highlights for them to put in that
Oh,
reel.
boy.
What are those going to be?
Boy, these are good questions, Dean. Okay. I think, all right, I'm going to pick a classroom teaching moment because I think you begin and end our career from the classroom. And I still, despite the fact that I'm in this role as a superintendent, I still think of myself as a teacher first. And it's where I go in my moments when I'm trying to remind myself why we do all this great work. But I remember a very vivid day when I was teaching high school English, a grade 11 class. And on our course syllabus was a book called Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella. And it's built around the game of baseball and particularly the Chicago White Sox. But there's this whole other story about dreams, and it's a beautifully written book. And I had in my class about 34 students, and at least 2/3 of them were from different parts of the world. And to enter this book, I really wanted to figure out how could I capture this a little bit. And in London, Ontario, there is a jewel of a baseball park called Labatt Park, and it is one of the oldest baseball stadiums in North America. And I called the manager. They were just off season. I called the manager, said, "Would it possible to bring a class to the park?" And he said, "Sure." So I was able to borrow one of our school buses and put all of us students on a bus, went to the phys ed department, got every baseball glove I could find, every ball I could find, and we went down. The manager met us and told us a little bit about the history of the field. And then we walked as a group around the infield and the outfield. And then we stopped at the dugout, and they all climbed into the dugout. And I read them that opening chapter about the thrill of the grass, and they could see out onto this beautiful field. And then we played a little bit of baseball. And I just remember it was just one of those perfect storms where we had a perfect day. We had kids running the bases the wrong way. We had the joy, the laughter, and it was just an entry point into a book. And I don't know if I could ever recreate something as magical as that. But I remember thinking, I'm never going to forget this because it was just something pretty special.
That's a
Would
great
be
one.
in there for sure. I'm thinking of the moment meeting a young woman by the name of Ariana in the Saanich School District, a grade 1 student that had written this poem about the fact that she is the change. And she literally stood in front of me and recited this poem and acted it out. And I remember the last line was, "I am the change." And this just beautiful, actually, I thought, like, this is her. I'm going to put it up. There she is right there. And
Nice.
oh, it doesn't go very well. But I
That's
keep these things pretty close. The enthusiasm that just popped from that was just so palpable. So those would be 2 really cool highlight reel things for me. And God, there's just so many amazing people that I've just come across in this journey that it would be tricky to get it down to 3. But those are 2.
I'll give you those. 2 are great. I love it. Appreciate that. Those are not easy to pull out, but boy, those are powerful. So you and I have had lots of conversations, and through those conversations, you have shared challenges that you faced and things that you're trying to navigate through. But like when you think about leadership and navigating challenging times over your career, of which that's what the job is. Can you tell us maybe about one leadership challenge that stuck with you in terms of a lesson learned? And it could be something you didn't maybe handle well, like maybe you didn't come at it the right way, or it was just more complicated than you thought. You got one in mind?
Yeah, I think that it's inevitable in our career that we learn some things the hard way. And I think one of the great parts about leadership is that if these moments come, it's what can we learn from this particular situation? And I remember leading some policy work that we were doing back in Ontario around assessment and evaluation, and reconstructing that to fit the work of the district. And it was a lesson I learned early about going too fast, too soon, around bringing stakeholder groups along with you and slowing things down to engage in the hard conversations. And I think it was early on when in my leadership journey where my desire to move quickly undermined it for a while, and I had to have someone reset me a little bit to slowing things down. First People's Principles of Learning says that learning takes patience and time, but I think that applies to a lot of things. And I think that probably in that particular instance, I learned very quickly that, look, you're not leaving if you don't have folks with you. And it feeds that adage that if you want to go fast, you can go by yourself, or if you want to go far, you can take people with you. So for me, that's a very visceral reminder about the fact that sometimes you have to slow these things down and always invest fully in listening, not just for the purpose of the performative element, but for truly engaging in dissent in a meaningful way. And I think that a couple times early on, I might have been just a little too fast with that. So that's really been a big part of how I try to show up in my work.
Well,
It's really
and I appreciate that.
is the power of listening and just
Yeah.
learning about people and about the culture and about place. Just be patient and let the voices rise up.
And I appreciate that because I think I can relate to that. I still do, in the sense that, like, all right, so this AI stuff I'm all in on now, I have an inordinate amount of time to learn about it, to understand it, to hear all these different perspectives. And you go into a school district and you forget that there's a bunch of teachers who have been busy living their lives, looking after families and kids or whatever. They don't know, they haven't had the conversations you've had. And so to give them time to get up to speed, to ask whatever question they have, to understand it in a way that they can, because now you're at a place where, like, all right, so it's here. What are we going to do next? How are we going to move forward? And sure, we want to move forward with it, but people still need time to process, and they aren't there. And that's the big jump from going to spending every day in a classroom to even moving to a district level. But the district office, you have the luxury of time and space to wrestle with a lot of things that a grade 6 teacher does not have time for, because they're busy being a grade 6 teacher.
Sure.
And so that just even understanding that difference in the way that yes, I can remember what it was like to be in that role, but you forget quickly because now I'm all in on this thing and I love this, whether it was the assessment stuff you're talking about or AI or whatever the thing is. Yeah, people
So
just
true.
need time.
So true, Dean. And I think that the more we can, in the roles that we're in, give ourselves access to that place, to proximity, and get as close to what Shane Saphir calls the street data, our voice in our schools, our classroom teachers, our students, community, and particularly those voices that are sometimes marginalized by the institution. How do we get to those places where we can listen for the kinds of things that will help us get better as a district? And that's the slowing it down part, as you
Yeah.
described.
So even in our conversation so far, you've already dropped a few little sort of leadership nuggets, but specifically if you're looking at a young person in your school division that's thinking about maybe, hey, maybe I wouldn't mind being a principal one day, or maybe some other role, you maybe recognize some talent in them or some ability to lead, but what other advice might you give them in terms of how they can prepare themselves for a future in educational leadership?
That's a great question, because I think a big part of our work is to try to provide opportunities for our educators at various levels to not just get exposure to, but participate in leadership. So I think that there are ways that a district, and that's no different, where we open up opportunities for people to explore the leadership piece. But I think in answer to your question, for the young person that's starting in their career, I've always been a big believer that one of the best pathways to the next role is to be really good in the one that you're in, and to really count every year that I taught and coached and were involved at the classroom level in which I had leadership opportunities. I count every minute that I had in that as being super helpful for the work that I'm in right now. So I guess my first thought would to be excited, be curious, and do everything in your power to learn as much about your learners as you can, and push yourself to be the best kind of educator you can be, and to network widely in that space and find those people that feel the same way. I think the other piece is for those that are reaching out like that is to be able to offer them opportunities to find mentors that can talk about their work so they can see what this looks like in a different way. And where possible in our district, create teacher opportunities for them to be at the table, to see leadership in action and be a participant in it. I talk to hockey scouts about this all the time in my previous world of coaching. And they often said to parents that were saying, what do I have to do to get to the next level? And their argument is just be good at the game that you're playing and we'll find you. And I think there's a little bit to be said for just really getting excited about the work that you're doing. And I can't say enough about my experience as a classroom teacher. And it informs my thinking every day. And I'm glad I had every second with it.
And education is so interesting in the sense that every school superintendent or director was at one time a classroom teacher. This is not something where we import somebody from the sales world and plop them into a role of CEO, and it just doesn't work that way. So everybody goes through that journey. And I also think that the interesting part is that there are different skill sets that you apply as a leader of organizations and so forth. However, there's tons and tons of parallels, certainly, as being a good teacher. And I would say that it's probably unlikely, it's probably not impossible, but probably unlikely that our school leaders were poor teachers. I think all of them were probably good teachers because, to your point, they excelled in what they were doing, which gave them an opportunity to try something else. However, you could probably make the argument that there are school leaders now who are better school leaders than they were teachers. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's possible. That's absolutely possible. But I hadn't really thought from that lens, but it's entirely possible. And I think certainly when you move to a different role, leadership role, there are other skill sets that become more predominant. It's not surprising to me that you asked the question about coaching and sports out of the blocks, because I would say that I've probably drawn a significant amount just how I work in this capacity, paired with my understanding and my continuing learning about schools and institutions and community. But I would say that has been a big chunk of that is how do we build a district and prioritize around how we want to get better? What does a year's worth of learning look like? What do we need to think about from building the instructional muscle of a district? Adjacent to that, the management muscle that drives that, and how do those muscles work together to create the kind of purposeful, impactful, responsive organization that we're trying to work with? Working very closely with the Board of Education on helping them actualize a strategic plan and help them in their role of governance to be excited and champions of that work. And those are things that you don't necessarily learn from the classroom, but you acquire those learnings as you engage in these new kinds of roles and working with the ministry and all of the other participation groupings that help make this all work. So those things that are about how does that team work together? And the coaching is part of that for me. For sure.
Big part of it, for sure. So obviously you don't get anywhere in this profession, in life, without the support of others. That nobody just does it by themselves. And you've already mentioned a few people that have been part of that journey for you, but can you give me a chance to name one other person that you want to just give a shout out for, that is somebody that, again, maybe it's in navigating your current role or that leadership role, or it could go back even further, if just somebody that you think has made a big impact in your career.
I think, Dean, we're so lucky. I know I am to have had so many people that at various points in my life have been in the right place at the right time, or I've been at the right place at the right time. I'm thinking, obviously, I mentioned Laura Elliott, the director of education in Thames Valley, and colleague of mine and dear friend for sure. But I'm thinking when you asked that question, I was thinking about a gentleman he passed a few years ago. His name's Marty Wollings, and he was an educator, department head in London, Ontario, that took a flyer on a kid from Owen Sound to hire him to a teaching contract in, I won't name the date, but it was a while ago. But he saw something in me that probably I didn't even see yet and gave me a chance, and then was a mentor throughout my career to support me. And so I think about someone like that. I think of Dave Everwin, superintendent in SD 63, who similarly took a flyer on the Ontario guy who happened to be a Leaf fan and still does. And despite those obvious misgivings, took a chance on me to join that team in Saanich. And I'm forever grateful for that opportunity to learn something new in great district and be closer to family and just get a chance to be a part of something awesome there. So I think those are people that I hadn't mentioned, but were a couple people that come to mind when you think of impactful people. And then there's just so many educators like we go on, you don't have that much time.
That's what I'm saying. And people don't really like this question because it limits you, but I think it's a good exercise. Just expand your palette of people. And you think back of, I mean, maybe there's sometimes people that I forgot about them, but wow, were they ever a big part of my journey? And I think that's just, gratitude is a big deal to me. And I think it's a big deal for us all to be paying attention. All right. I got three quick questions to get you out of here. Professionally, what are you reading or listening to right now?
Professionally, I'm reading currently, actually, Shakespeare's recent book called Pedagogy as a Voice. I multiple copies for our district leaders, and we're hoping to engage some in our work a little bit. I was gifted a book when I left Saanich called Hope Matters by Ellen Kelsey, and it's just this really book around how changing the way that we can look at solving environmental crisis through hope. And I really enjoy that from a fiction standpoint because I still like reading there. Richard Bachman's book, what was it called? I can't remember, but he wrote the Beartown trilogy, and I just love his books. I think it's called My Friends, actually. And there's a line from a poem in there that's really been banging around in my head, and from Mary Oliver. She says, "Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life." And if we used to do this whole novel, and I've been thinking a lot about that line because it does sum up all of the kind of things we're doing at the beginning of a school year and this long and sometimes complex journey. But what is it we're trying to do here? And we hold that precious opportunity every day. So anyway, that's a little bit of what I'm reading anyway these days, and trying to make sure I get the odd Blue Jays 30 and 30 in too, just to keep an eye on.
Yeah. That's right. It's a good time to be a baseball fan. What about, besides Blue Jays 30, you got anything kind of on the binge list or anything that sort of is a bit of an escapism for you?
Yeah, I had it, but I think I've been going back to a couple of the shows that I often just enjoy every once in a while. I'm a big fan of Ted Lasso's series, and finished that one because it manages the comedic and the poignant, and there's a lot of little nuggets about leadership in there too. So I think that's one for sure. And Shrinking is another one that I'm a little bit behind though, I think, in that front. So I'm open to some suggestions here, Dean. I know you've got some good ones.
I will tell you that I've got a couple of guests coming up in an episode from Newfoundland who did a whole leadership series around Ted Lasso.
Really?
Yes, and they're in Newfoundland education, kind of building on the principles of Ted Lasso and turned it into a whole professional learning experience for their principals.
Tell me more.
Yeah, again, you have to listen to the podcast. That'll be part of it. But yeah, they really they were actually using episodes as part of theirs. Instead of a book study, they were using episodes, and then they would kind of discuss the implications of it. And they've got teachers and principals with Believe up on there and all the kind of Ted Lasso isms and looking at the application of that. So that was a fun way. So excited to ship that.
I've got to see that one. That sounds
fantastic.
Sure. Tell them I said hi.
Yeah. And okay, last question. And again, I did have a sneak peek of this. So you're a newcomer to Powell River and your community, and you were gracious enough to give me a brief tour and we had a nice little meal. But all right, so I'd like to come back again sometime. And if I were to come
Mm.
back again sometime, where else? What else? What other place would you like to show me around? And I
Do-
think I might know it. I might be the one that you're going to say, but maybe not. I'll
Okay.
give you a hint. If it's not the
Okay.
one you
Listen. Okay. And all you folks from the Cadet district, please know that I'm still learning. But I just this weekend, actually, I drove just up the Sunshine Coast a little piece to a small place called Lund. And it's a beautiful little community that has access to water taxis and charter boats that you can take. And one of them is a water taxi that can take you to an island called Savory Island. And I spent Saturday of the long weekend on Savory Island, and it's allegedly called the Hawaii of the West or the North British Columbia. And I gotta check this out. My goodness, what a day! Rented a bike. The water was beautiful and warm, sandy beaches, and just great people. So there's one. And then if you're prone to hiking, as my golden retriever, 19-month-old Scout, is always pretty close by. He's still back in Victoria with my lovely wife, but we're working on getting everyone together. But there's a trail called Scout Mountain that I hike that just brings you up to a beautiful panoramic view of the Powell River area and Cathet and just the ocean and the islands. And so those are two. So next time you come, Dean, bring your hiking boots and we'll catch a water taxi. And we can rent a bike from a gentleman by the name of Eric, who really just amazing people. So there's a couple for you.
Yes, yeah, the Hawaii of Canada, that had my ears perked up. So I definitely want to check that out sometime. Listen, buddy, this was always great to chat with you. I appreciate what you shared today. I know there's just so many pieces in here that people find valuable. And again, that's the whole point of this, is just everyone sharing their journey is a little different, but certainly lots of things that we connect with. So appreciate your time today.
Dean, before we go, and we've known each other for quite a long time, and I've been following this podcast, but I've also want to thank you for the time that you spent with us. And every interaction I have with you, you are one of the people that I believe deeply harnesses hope. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for all of the great ways that you connect people to the great work that we're doing. I'm humbled and honored to be a part of this conversation with you, and I hold you as a dear friend and colleague.
Feelings mutual, my friend. So we'll talk soon.